Korean Mafia boss sees his ex at a funeral. The child beside her has his eyes. The boy's fingers tightened around Nia Carter's hand so hard his knuckles turned pale. "Mom," he whispered, voice trembling in the hush of the memorial hall. "That man over there, he's looking at me." Nia's breath snagged. The room smelled like white lilies and expensive incense, like grief dressed in silk. At the front, a polished casket sat beneath soft lights, surrounded by bowing mourners in black. Behind her, murmurs swelled. Too quiet to be kind. She didn't need to turn to know what her son meant. She felt the stare the way she felt soul winter through thin fabric, sharp, unavoidable, aimed to make her flinch. She did turn anyway, and the shock of it landed like a slap. Kang Jun-ho stood across the hall, tall and still, surrounded by men who moved like shadows. His suit fit like armor. His face was the same, cold, disciplined, carved from restraint, except his eyes weren't cold at all. They were fixed on Eli, on her son, on the little face tilted up toward the lights, eyes wide and dark, lashes too long, the exact shape that Nia had once traced with trembling hands in another lifetime. And then the identity tension hit, harder than the shock, because every head in the hall started turning, not toward the casket, toward the black woman who didn't belong. Nia felt the weight of it, the whispers that always came first, the assumptions that followed. Foreigner, opportunist, wrong place, wrong skin, wrong air to breathe in a room where power decided who deserved grief. A security guard stepped into her path, blocking the aisle. "Ma'am," he said, voice clipped, "you need to come with us." Nia's throat tightened. Her mind ran faster than her pulse. She had promised herself she would slip in, bow once, leave without being seen. She had promised Eli that today would be quiet. But the guard lifted his hand and two more men moved in, too close, too coordinated, their eyes scanning the boy like he was an object. Immediate danger flashed bright and ugly. Not embarrassment, not gossip, something worse. One of the men reached for Eli. Nia jerked her son behind her, heart pounding. "Don't touch him!" And across the hall, Kang Jun-ho finally moved, not rushed, not loud, just one step forward, terrifying in its calm, while his gaze dropped to the small sun-shaped pendant resting on Eli's chest. Nia's stomach turned to ice because she knew that pendant. She knew who it belonged to, and she suddenly didn't know who in this room had decided it was time for the past to find her. Junho's eyes locked on the sun pendant as if it had just answered a question he'd been asking for years. 3 days earlier, Nia had stared at the funeral notice until the letters blurred. Chairman Han Sung-min. The name sat in her small apartment like a heavy guest. The only man in Seoul who had ever looked at her without measuring what her skin might cost him. The only one who had offered her a job when she'd been a single mother with a foreign passport, a bruised heart, and a baby who cried like the world was too sharp. Eli had climbed onto the couch beside her, knees tucked under him. "Is he the nice grandpa?" "Yes," Nia had whispered. "He was kind to us." "Are we going to see him?" Nia had pressed her lips together, staring at the paper until her hands shook. "We're going to say goodbye." She hadn't told her son the other truth, that funerals didn't only bury people. Sometimes they unburied secrets. Now, in the memorial hall, she felt every reason she'd tried to stay away closing in. The guard kept his palm half raised, a polite threat. "Ma'am, your name isn't on the family list." Nia swallowed. "Chairman Han invited me." "Chairman Han is deceased," the guard replied, as if that erased her existence too. Behind him, a woman's voice floated, smooth, amused. "Of course she claims that." Nia turned, and Seoyura stood there like she belonged to the lighting. Elegant black dress, diamond earrings that caught grief and made it shine. Her eyes swept Nia's coat, Nia's worn shoes, the child's small hand in hers. Then Yura smiled, thin and satisfied. "This is a private memorial," she said, loud enough for nearby mourners to hear. Not a charity event. The whispers sharpened. Nia felt them land on her shoulders like stones. Eli pressed closer to her leg. Mom? Nia's spine straightened. I'm here to pay respects. Yura's smile widened. To whom? To the chairman? Or to the opportunity? Nia refused to look away. She had lived too long in rooms where people waited for her to shrink. Move. Yura's brows lifted. Excuse me? Nia's pulse hammered, but her voice stayed steady. Move. Please. For a moment, Yura's expression tightened, anger flickering beneath the polish. Then she tipped her chin toward the guard. Remove her. And that was when the men in black moved in with purpose. Not security, not ceremony, something else. One reached for Eli. Nia's body reacted before thought. She pulled her son behind her, shifting her weight the way she had learned in crowded buses, in foreign streets, in places where hands reached too easily. Don't, she warned. The man's eyes were flat. The child comes too. That sentence snapped the last thread of restraint in the room. A hush fell like a curtain, because someone stepped between Nia and the men without raising his voice. Kang Jun-ho. He stood close enough that Nia could smell the clean spice of his cologne, close enough that the memory of his hands, once warm, once trembling, flashed through her like pain. He didn't look at Nia first. He looked at Eli. Then he looked at the man reaching for the boy. Take your hand off him, Jun-ho said softly. The man froze. Yura's eyes widened, then recovered. Jun-ho, you don't need to... Jun-ho lifted one finger, and Yura fell silent like a dog that had been trained. He finally turned to Nia. His gaze flicked over her face with a violence that didn't show on his features, like he had been punched and refused to let anyone see the bruise. Nia, he said, quiet. Her name and his voice cracked something inside her. She didn't answer. Jun-ho's eyes went back to Eli, and for the first time, his control slipped. Just enough for Nia to see it. A flicker of disbelief, a flicker of grief. Then he looked at the pendant on Eli's chest again, the small sun charm, worn smooth at the edges, a pendant Nia had hidden for 6 years, a pendant that should never have been seen in this room. Jun-ho turned toward the men. Who ordered this? The guard swallowed. Ma'am, CO. Jun-ho didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Leave, he said. The men stepped back immediately. Yura's composure cracked. Jun-ho, she's not supposed to be here. Chairman Han's guests are screened. Chairman Han invited her, Jun-ho interrupted, and the fact that he said it like certainty made the room shift. Mourners stared. Staff bowed their heads. Nia felt the power reversal hit like a wave. The same people who had judged her now watched her like she was protected by a force they didn't understand. Jun-ho stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. Did anyone touch you? Nia tightened her hold on Eli's hand. No. His gaze flicked to the men again. If any of you approach her again without my permission, he said calmly, you won't work in Seoul. The threat wasn't loud. It was final. Yura's cheeks flushed. You're humiliating me. Jun-ho didn't look at her. You did that yourself. Nia's chest rose and fell too fast. She didn't want this. She didn't want his protection, his attention, his past. But she couldn't ignore the danger in the way those men had moved. And she couldn't ignore the way Jun-ho stared at Eli like he was looking at a ghost. When Jun-ho's hand hovered near Eli's pendant, Nia realized he knew exactly what it was. And that meant he knew far more than she could survive. After the formal bows and measured condolences, the memorial hall began to loosen. People moved in slow circles, whispering behind hands. The casket remained at the front like a sealed mouth. Nia tried to leave quietly, her heart still pounding, Eli's small fingers still clamped around hers. But Kang Jun-ho didn't let the space between them grow. He guided them, not touching, not forcing, down a corridor lined with dark wood and framed photos of Chairman Han shaking hands with politicians and CEOs. His men stayed back, far enough to pretend privacy, close enough to remove choice. Nia stopped near a window that looked out over Seoul's gray sky. "Why are you here?" she asked without turning. Junho's voice came from behind her, too steady. "Chairman Han was my family." Nia's laugh came out sharp, humorless. "So was I, once." Silence stretched. Outside, snow threatened, but didn't fall. Eli peeked around her hip, studying Junho with the blunt honesty of a child. "Mom, who is he?" Nia's stomach clenched. She hadn't planned for this moment. She had planned for invisibility, for a quick bow, for escape. She didn't look at Junho. No one. Junho's breath changed, just slightly, like he'd taken a hit and refused to stagger. His gaze stayed on Eli. "What's your name?" Eli hesitated, then lifted his chin. "Eli." Junho repeated it, tasting the syllables like they might cut. "Eli." Nia tightened her grip. "We're leaving." Junho didn't block the doorway. He didn't raise his voice. His restraint was worse than anger. It was a cage made of politeness. He stepped closer, eyes flicking to Eli's face again, then to the pendant. "You still have it," he said. Nia's throat went dry. "Don't." Junho's gaze sharpened. "That pendant belonged to my mother." The words hit with a sickening weight. Eli looked down at the charm, then back up. "Grandma." Nia's lungs refused to work for a second. She had told Eli it was a lucky charm, a piece of sunshine to wear when the world got cold. She hadn't told him it was a piece of a family that could swallow him. Junho's voice lowered. "Why does my mother's pendant hang around your child's neck?" Nia's mind raced, searching for the safest lie. But the corridor behind them carried footsteps, soft, careful, like someone listening. She couldn't risk speaking the truth here. "Give me space," Nia said sharp. "You don't get to ask me anything." Junho's jaw tightened. "You disappeared." Nia's eyes stung, anger and grief mixing into something dangerous. "I survived." He flinched and she saw it, just a fraction, before his face hardened again. "Tell me," he said, "is he mine?" The question wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It cracked the air between them. Nia stared at the window until the city blurred. The answer sat on her tongue like blood. She forced it back down. "You have a fiancé," she said instead. A shadow crossed his eyes. "Not anymore." Behind them, a door clicked softly like someone slipping away after hearing too much. Nia's skin crawled. She grabbed Eli's hand. "We're leaving now." Junho moved with her, matching her steps without touching. "Where do you live?" Nia glared. "You don't need to know." His gaze didn't blink. "Someone tried to take your child in a memorial hall full of witnesses." Nia's pulse spiked. She hated that he was right. Junho's voice dropped lower. "That wasn't security. That was a message." Nia swallowed hard. "From who?" Junho's eyes narrowed, and she felt him make a decision. "I don't know," he admitted. "Yet." That honesty stunned her more than his threats ever could have. He turned slightly, speaking into his phone in a quiet rhythm. Then he looked back at her. "Your file is empty," he said. Nia froze. "What?" Junho's expression turned colder. "The last record of you in Seoul is a ghost. Someone erased you." Nia's chest tightened, because she had always suspected that. She just hadn't wanted confirmation. Junho's gaze softened by a millimeter, almost nothing. "You weren't supposed to come back." Nia's throat burned. "Neither were you." He looked at Eli again and the air changed. Not softer, more dangerous, because whatever Junho believed now, he believed it with the kind of certainty that destroyed worlds. As Nia led Eli away, she didn't see the figure at the end of the corridor, lifting a phone to whisper, "He recognized the child." Nia's apartment was small, warm, and crowded with the soft chaos of survival. Eli's drawings taped to the wall, a kettle that whistled too loudly, a stack of folded uniforms on the chair. It was the kind of home she had built with her own hands, one careful day at a time, to prove she didn't need anyone. And yet that night, every shadow outside the window felt like it belonged to someone else. Eli sat at the table, coloring a sun with yellow crayons worn down to nubs. "Mom," he asked, voice small, "was that man mad at you?" Nia forced her smile into place. "No." Eli frowned. He looked sad. Nia's fingers tightened around the mug in her hand. "People can be both." Eli pointed at the pendant on his chest. "Is this from him?" Nia's heart stuttered. She crossed the room and crouched beside him, tucking a curl behind his ear. "This is from someone who wanted us to be okay." Eli's eyes searched hers like he could see the truth hiding behind them. "Are we okay?" Nia kissed his forehead. "We will be." She didn't say what she was thinking. If we leave fast enough. The next morning at the hospice, the air smelled of disinfectant and warm soup. Nia moved through her shift with practiced calm, checking on patients, adjusting blankets, speaking gently in English when families looked exhausted and scared. One patient, Mrs. Park, reached out with trembling fingers. "Nia, you came back." Nia smiled softly. "I promised." Mrs. Park's cloudy eyes sharpened for a moment. "Men in suits came asking about you." Nia's stomach dipped. "When?" "Yesterday," Mrs. Park whispered. "They said they were family." Nia's blood ran cold. Family. She forced her voice steady. "Did you tell them anything?" Mrs. Park shook her head weakly. "Chairman Han told us you were protected." Nia swallowed. Chairman Han. Even in death, he was trying to shield her. A door opened at the end of the corridor, and the entire hallway seemed to tense. Kang Jun-ho walked in like the building recognized his authority. He wore no smile, no visible weapon, no raised voice, just quiet power. Nia froze mid-step, the tray in her hands suddenly too heavy. Her co-workers stared. Some bowed instinctively. Others whispered, eyes darting from his suit to her face, assembling a story in real time. Identity tension hit again, sharp and humiliating, because she could feel the question in the air. What did the foreign nurse do to deserve him? Jun-ho's gaze found hers, and his expression shifted. Tiny, controlled, like he had already decided he would not let this place swallow her. He approached the desk, speaking to the supervisor in a low voice Nia couldn't hear. The supervisor's eyes widened. She nodded too quickly. Then Jun-ho turned to Nia as if the hallway were empty. "I'm not here to disrupt your work," he said. "I'm here because you're in danger." Nia's jaw tightened. "You're the danger." His eyes held hers without flinching. "If I were, you wouldn't be standing." Nia hated that her pulse agreed. He lowered his voice. "Someone wants your child." Nia's grip tightened on the tray. "I can protect him." Jun-ho's gaze flicked, briefly, to the hospice doors, to the corridor corners. Not alone. Before she could answer, a nurse hurried up, breathless. "Nia, your son's school called. There was an incident." The words punched the air from her lungs. Nia's face drained. "What kind of incident?" The nurse shook her head. "They said he's okay, but you need to come now." Nia moved without thinking, feet flying, heart roaring in her ears. Jun-ho didn't ask permission. He followed. Outside, his black car waited like a promise and a threat. Nia hesitated for only a second, then climbed in, because pride was worthless if it cost her son. As the car pulled into traffic, Jun-ho's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and something hard flickered in his eyes. "What?" Nia snapped. Jun-ho's voice stayed calm. "Someone sent a message to my fiancé." Nia's skin prickled. "Why do I care?" Jun-ho looked at her, and his gaze turned dangerous. "Because the message said, the child is alive." Nia's blood turned to ice. Chairman Han's death hadn't ended anything. It had started a countdown. As they sped toward Eli's school, Nia realized the funeral wasn't the first attack. It had been a warning. The school office smelled like crayons and panic. Eli sat on a small chair with a bandage wrapped around his elbow, eyes wide but dry. When he saw Nia, he launched himself forward. "Mom!" Nia dropped to her knees, arms crushing him close. She scanned him quickly. No blood, no bruises beyond the scrape. "What happened?" she demanded, voice shaking despite her effort. The teacher wrung her hands. "There was a man at pickup. He said he was family. He tried to take Eli." Nia's throat tightened. "And you let him touch my child?" "We didn't," the teacher said quickly. "Mr. Kang's security—" Nia's head snapped up. Jun-ho stood near the door, speaking quietly to a man who looked like he belonged to him. The man nodded once and left. Nia's hands trembled as she cradled Eli's face. "Did he hurt you?" Eli shook his head. "I ran." Nia's breath left her in a rush she hadn't earned. "You did good." Eli's gaze slid past her shoulder to Jun-ho. "He said my pendant was pretty." Nia's stomach dropped. "Who said that?" Eli frowned. "The man." Jun-ho stepped closer, his presence filling the space like a storm behind glass. "What did the man look like?" Eli hesitated, then said, "He smelled like flowers, like the lady at the funeral." Nia's blood went cold. Yura's perfume had been sharp and sweet. It had clung to the air around her like ownership. Jun-ho's eyes narrowed, a flicker of controlled fury. "Seo Yura," he murmured. Nia stood. Eli pressed against her leg. "You promised she wasn't your fiancé anymore." Jun-ho's jaw tightened. "She doesn't accept promises. She accepts power." Nia's voice sharpened. "Then control your power." Jun-ho's gaze held hers, and for a brief moment his mask cracked, pain flashing beneath the steel. "You think I didn't try?" he asked quietly. The question hit like a bruise. Nia didn't answer because if she did, she might say the thing she'd never allowed herself to say. "You weren't the only one trapped." Eli tugged her sleeve. "Mom, can we go home?" Nia swallowed, forcing her tone soft. "Yes, baby." Jun-ho's voice cut in, calm but final. "Not to that apartment." Nia's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" Jun-ho didn't raise his voice. "They found your child at school. They will find him at home." Nia's chest tightened. "We'll leave Seoul." Jun-ho's gaze sharpened. "And go where? With what records? With what protection?" Nia hated him for making sense. Eli winced suddenly, pressing his bandaged arm. The teacher frowned. "The scrape is deeper than I thought. We should have it checked." Nia's instincts flared. "I can clean it." Jun-ho was already moving. "Hospital." Nia's stomach sank. Hospitals meant paperwork. Paperwork meant names. Names meant trails. But Eli's eyes were glassy with pain now, and Nia's pride cracked under the weight of motherhood. At the hospital, fluorescent lights hummed. Nurses moved quickly, efficient, indifferent. Nia held Eli steady while a doctor cleaned the scrape, took a small sample to check for infection. Jun-ho stood a few steps away, watching with an intensity that made Nia's skin burn. When the doctor asked for Eli's information, Nia answered smoothly. "Eli Carter, 6, no allergies." The doctor nodded, entering it into the system. Jun-ho's gaze flicked to the screen, to the forms, to the name. Then to Eli, then back to Nia, as if he were watching a puzzle click into place. A nurse approached with a file and paused, startled when she recognized Jun-ho. She bowed too deeply. "Mr. Kang." Jun-ho barely acknowledged her. His focus stayed on Eli. The nurse glanced at the pendant, then at Nia. "That's unusual," she murmured. Nia's spine stiffened. "What is?" The nurse hesitated. "That pendant, the sun charm. I've seen one like it before, in Chairman Han's office. He said it was—" Her voice cut off when she saw Jun-ho's eyes. Junho stepped closer. What did he say? The nurse swallowed. He said it was a key for someone's future. Nia's skin prickled. A key. Junho's voice lowered. Did Chairman Han leave anything for me? The nurse glanced around, then leaned in. He left an envelope. He said it was for you if the sun came back. Nia's stomach turned. If the sun came back. Han's way of speaking in riddles, his way of hiding truth inside warmth. Junho's jaw clenched. Where is it? The nurse whispered the location. Junho nodded once, then turned back to Nia. Stay, he said. Nia's eyes narrowed. Don't order me. Junho's gaze softened by a fraction. It wasn't an order. It was fear. Nia's pulse stuttered because she realized something. He wasn't only protecting them to control them. He was terrified he'd lose them again. Minutes later, Junho returned with the envelope. His hands were steady, but his eyes weren't. He opened it slowly, pulled out a folded letter, and read. Nia watched his face change, one line at a time, until the coldness cracked into something raw. What? She demanded. Junho lifted his gaze to her, and his voice came out low. He wrote that you didn't betray me. Nia's breath caught. He wrote, Junho continued, jaw tight, that someone threatened you, someone close to me. Nia's knees weakened. Junho swallowed hard, eyes dropping to Eli like the truth hurt too much to look at directly. And he wrote, Junho said, voice breaking just enough to frighten Nia, that Eli is my son. Nia's world tilted as Junho stared at her like a man standing at the edge of forgiveness he didn't deserve. The car ride to Junho's estate felt like a surrender Nia had never agreed to. Seoul's skyline blurred past the window, glass towers, neon signs, winter trees stripped bare. Nia held Eli close, his head resting against her shoulder, bandaged arm tucked carefully. Junho sat across from them in silence, his gaze flicking to Eli every few seconds like he needed to confirm the boy was real. Nia's voice came out tight. You can't just take us. Junho's answer was calm. I'm not taking you. I'm giving you a place no one can enter without my permission. That's still a cage. His eyes held hers, steady. Then tell me what makes it not a cage. Nia swallowed. Her pride wanted to spit fire. Her fear wanted to beg. She did neither. Rules, she said. You don't come into our rooms without knocking. You don't touch my son without asking. And you don't, her throat tightened, use him as leverage. Junho's jaw tightened. I don't leverage children. Nia stared at him. Your world does. A flicker of pain crossed his face, fast and sharp. Then I'll change my world. The estate gates opened with quiet efficiency. Inside, the grounds were wide and immaculate, winter grass trimmed, like someone could control the season if they worked hard enough. Eli lifted his head, eyes wide. Is this a castle? Nia swallowed. It's a house. It's a castle, Eli insisted, awe softening his fear. Junho's voice turned gentler than Nia expected. You can call it a castle if you want. Eli studied him, suspicious. Do you live here? Junho hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Eli's brows knitted. Are you my dad? Nia's heart stopped. The question hung in the air like a blade. Junho's face went still, but his eyes softened, barely, painfully. He didn't lie. I don't know what you've been told, he said carefully, but I'm someone who should have been there. Nia's throat burned. She hated the honesty because it made her remember the boy Junho once was, the one who had looked at her like she was the first quiet thing in his violent life. Eli blinked. Will you leave again? Junho's jaw tightened. No. Nia watched Eli's small face, watched him absorb the word like it might be too heavy to trust. Inside the estate, staff bowed, their eyes flicked to Nia, briefly, judgment flashing, until Junho's presence cut it off. Then Seo Yura appeared at the top of the stairs. Nia's blood turned cold. Yura wore black silk like she was still in mourning, but her eyes were bright with calculation. "Junho," she purred. "You brought her here." Nia felt Eli's hand squeeze hers. Yura's gaze dropped to the pendant on Eli's chest, and her smile tightened. Junho's voice stayed calm. "Pack your things." Yura blinked. "What?" Junho descended the steps slowly, each step a decision. "You're leaving." Yura's composure cracked. "You can't break our engagement because of a—" Her gaze flicked to Nia, dismissive. "Woman who ran away." Nia's spine stiffened. She opened her mouth. But Junho spoke first, and the room shifted under his words. "She didn't run," he said, voice quiet. "She was hunted." Yura laughed, sharp and false. "By whom? Me?" Junho's gaze didn't flinch. "Maybe." A gasp rippled through the staff. Eyes widened. Whispers started. Public power reversal struck again, stronger, because Yura, the untouchable fiancé, suddenly looked very touchable. Nia felt the shock of being defended not in private, not in whispers, but in front of witnesses. Yura's face flushed. "You're humiliating me for her." Junho's voice stayed steady. "You humiliated yourself when you sent men after a child." Yura's smile died. "You can't prove that." Junho's eyes turned ice cold. "Try me." Yura's gaze slid to Nia, venom slipping through her elegance. "He'll destroy you, you know. He destroys everything he touches." Nia's voice came out calm, even as her hands trembled. "Then maybe you shouldn't have tried to touch my son." For a moment, Yura looked stunned, like she wasn't used to black women speaking back in rooms like this. Then she turned and stormed upstairs, fury cracking her perfect posture. Junho watched her go, then exhaled slowly, like holding control had cost him. He turned to Nia, voice softer. "I ended it." Nia's eyes stung. "That doesn't erase what happened." Junho nodded once. "I know." He looked at Eli again, and the vulnerability in his gaze was almost unbearable. "I missed 6 years," he said quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I want a chance to earn it." Nia's chest tightened. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to leave. Instead, she swallowed hard and said the only truth she could afford. "Then start by protecting him," she whispered. "Not your pride." Junho's gaze sharpened like he'd been given a mission. "I will," he promised. Outside, a car engine purred at the gate, unseen but felt. And somewhere in the city, someone made a phone call that would turn this castle into a battlefield. As night fell over the estate, a sealed folder landed on Kang Dae-sung's desk, labeled with one name, Nia Carter. The next morning, the scandal arrived before breakfast. Nia found it on her phone while Eli ate toast at the long dining table, feet swinging above the floor. A headline in Korean, translated automatically into English, "Foreign nurse accused of infiltrating Chairman Han's funeral. Kang heir involved" below it. Blurry photos of Nia in the memorial hall, Eli's face half hidden, Junho's black suit unmistakable. Nia's hands shook. "They're using my child." Eli looked up, mouth full. "Mom?" Nia forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing, baby." Junho entered the room like he had been summoned by her panic. One look at her face, and his eyes hardened. He took the phone from her gently, scanning the article. His jaw tightened. Dae-sung. Nia stared. "Your uncle?" Junho's voice stayed calm, but something lethal moved under it. "He controls half the media in this city." Nia's throat burned. "So I'm trapped." Junho's gaze lifted to hers. "No, he wants you to feel trapped." Nia's laugh came out sharp. "It's working." Before Junho could respond, the front doors opened and a line of men in dark coats walked in. Police, uniforms stiff with authority. Nia's blood turned to ice. The lead officer held up a warrant. "Nia Carter, you are requested for questioning regarding an incident at Chairman Han's memorial." Eli's eyes widened. "Mom?" Nia stepped backward instinctively, heart pounding. Jun-ho stepped forward, calm as winter. "You'll speak to my lawyer," he said, voice even. The officer swallowed. "Mr. Kang." Jun-ho didn't raise his voice. "You can wait outside." The officer hesitated, glancing at the mansion staff, at the security men who didn't blink, at Jun-ho's eyes that promised consequences without sound. Then the officer nodded stiffly and backed away. Public power reversal hit again, this time in uniforms and law, because the police who had come to intimidate Nia now stood outside like guests waiting for permission. Nia's throat tightened. She hated how easily Jun-ho could bend the world. She hated even more that she needed it. Jun-ho turned to her, voice low. "They won't take you." Nia's eyes stung. "They can take my reputation." Jun-ho's gaze sharpened. "Then we take it back." Later, at a sleek police station lobby filled with reporters, the air buzzed like a hive. Nia walked in with her head high, Eli's hand in hers, Jun-ho at her side like a shadow with teeth. Cameras flashed, whispers rose, foreign nurse, Mafia heir, secret child. Nia's skin crawled with judgment, but she refused to shrink. Yura appeared near the reporters, dressed in tasteful sorrow, eyes shining with fake concern. "I just want the truth," she told cameras softly. "Chairman Han would have wanted justice." Nia's stomach turned. Jun-ho didn't look at Yura. He looked at the reporters. "The truth is simple," he said calmly. "Someone attempted to abduct a child at a funeral." The room fell silent. Jun-ho's voice didn't change. "The security footage has been submitted." Yura's smile faltered. The lead officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Kang, this is an ongoing—" Jun-ho's gaze turned to him. "Then investigate the correct suspect." He lifted his phone and played a short clip, grainy but clear enough, a man reaching for Eli, Yura's voice in the background saying, "Remove her." Gasps burst from the crowd. Yura's face drained. Nia's heart hammered. She hadn't known Jun-ho had that footage. Jun-ho's voice stayed calm. "Ask her why she gave the order." Yura's lips parted, scrambling for control. "That's edited." Jun-ho's eyes didn't blink. "Say it under oath." Reporters surged, questions flying like knives. Nia felt Eli's hand tighten in hers. She looked down, saw fear flicker in his eyes. She bent slightly, whispering, "Stay close to me." Eli nodded, swallowing hard. Inside the station, an officer handed Jun-ho a folder. Jun-ho's gaze flicked over it, then to Nia. "What?" she asked, heart pounding. Jun-ho's voice dropped. "The report says you were accused of stealing from Chairman Han." Nia's blood turned cold. "What?" Jun-ho's jaw tightened. "They're trying to make you look like a criminal." Nia's fingers trembled, but she forced her voice steady. "I never stole anything." Jun-ho's eyes sharpened with certainty. "I know." He glanced at Eli's pendant, sun-shaped, innocent, heavy with meaning. Then he leaned closer, voice so low only she could hear. "Chairman Han left something," he murmured, "and I think they believe you have it." Nia's throat tightened. She didn't. Did she? In her memory, a sealed envelope slipped into her coat pocket after her last hospice shift, left by a trembling old hand. She had assumed it was a condolence note. She hadn't opened it yet. And suddenly she realized the real reason the wolves had started circling. That night, Nia opened the forgotten envelope and found one sentence that made her blood run cold. "The sun pendant unlocks everything." The envelope paper felt too thin for the weight it carried. Nia sat on the edge of the guest bed in Jun-ho's mansion, Eli asleep beside her, his small chest rising and falling in soft rhythms. She unfolded the note with careful fingers. "The sun pendant unlocks everything. Don't trust Dae-sung. Don't trust the woman in black silk. If Jun-ho is worthy, he will choose you in public, 3 times, without asking you to shrink. No signature." but Nia knew the handwriting. Chairman Han's. Her throat tightened, emotion and fear twisting together. Han hadn't just protected her, he'd planned for the day the truth would come roaring back. She glanced at Eli's pendant, the small sun catching moonlight. She'd always thought it was just a promise. Now it was a key, a weapon, a target. A soft knock came at the door. Nia stiffened. Yes? Junho stepped in slowly, as if he understood that even his footsteps could feel like an invasion. He didn't come closer than the doorway. He had removed his suit jacket, the white shirt beneath slightly rumpled, proof that he was human under the armor. "You're awake," he said quietly. Nia held up the note. Han planned this. Junho's gaze fixed on the paper. His face tightened. He planned for Dae-sung. Nia's voice shook despite her effort. "Your uncle is trying to destroy me." Junho's eyes darkened. "He's trying to control me." Nia laughed, sharp and broken. "Then we're both trapped in your family's games." Junho stepped forward one pace, then stopped, respecting the invisible boundary she had drawn. "You're not trapped," he said softly. "You can leave." Nia's heart slammed against her ribs. "Leave where? With cameras watching? With men reaching for my child?" Junho's voice stayed steady. "I can get you out of the country." Nia's jaw tightened. "And would you let me go?" The question hung between them like a confession. Junho's breath changed. For the first time since the funeral, he looked tired. "Yes," he said quietly, "if that's what you choose." Nia's throat burned. "Then why are you fighting so hard?" Junho's eyes flicked to Eli, asleep, pendant rising and falling with his breath. "Because I'm a father," he said, voice low, "and because I owe you more than silence." Nia's hands trembled. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hate him. Both feelings lived in her like storms. She stood, careful not to wake Eli. "I'm not choosing you," she said, voice firm. "I'm choosing myself." Junho didn't flinch. "Good." Nia blinked, caught off guard. Junho's gaze stayed on hers. "You should have chosen yourself 6 years ago. You should have been able to." Nia's throat tightened. "I tried. Someone threatened my child before he was even born." Junho's jaw clenched, fury flashing beneath his calm. "Who?" Nia swallowed. "A woman came to my clinic. She wore black silk. She said she was helping you." Junho's eyes turned cold. "Yura." Nia nodded, tears burning but not falling. "She said if I stayed, you would die. She said if I left, I could live." Junho's face tightened like he was swallowing glass. Nia's voice steadied, strength rising from the place pain had carved. "So here's my choice. I will not be hidden. I will not be your secret. If you want my son in your life, you will prove the truth publicly. You will end this." Junho's gaze sharpened. "You're asking for war." Nia's mouth lifted in a bitter smile. "War found me anyway." Junho stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once, slow, deliberate. "Okay," he said softly. One Korean word slipped out, almost a whisper. "Gwanchanha." "It's okay." Nia's breath caught. She hadn't expected softness. Junho took a breath, steadying himself. "Tomorrow there's a reading of Chairman Han's will. Dae-sung will be there. Yura will be there." Nia's pulse spiked. "And you think the pendant?" Junho nodded. "Han's note said the sun unlocks everything." Nia looked down at Eli's chest, at the small charm she had treated like comfort. Now it looked like a door, and doors, she'd learned, always led somewhere dangerous. At dawn, Nia fastened the sun pendant under Eli's shirt and realized she was carrying the one key Dae-sung would kill for. The will reading took place in Chairman Han's private conference suite. High above Seoul, glass walls framing a city that never stopped moving. The room was full of black suits and polished grief. Kang Dae-sung sat at the head of the table like a king who hadn't been crowned yet. His smile was smooth, his eyes sharp. Beside him, Seo Yura sat with perfect posture, her hands folded, her expression mournful enough for cameras. Nia entered holding Eli's hand, her spine straight, her fear locked behind her ribs. Whispers rose immediately, foreign woman, child, scandal, until Junho walked in behind her. The room fell silent. Junho didn't touch Nia, but he didn't let distance form either. He stood close enough that everyone could see where his loyalty sat. Public power reversal arrived like thunder without sound. The same people who would have dismissed her now watched her like she was the center of a decision they couldn't control. Dae-sung's smile widened. "Nephew." Junho's voice stayed calm. "Uncle." Yura's gaze slid to Eli, and for a moment her mask cracked, something hungry flashing through. The lawyer cleared his throat, opened a folder, began reading in measured tones. Assets, shares, donations, condolences written in legal language. Nia's fingers tightened around Eli's hand as the words blurred into tension. Then the lawyer paused. "Chairman Han left a sealed addendum," he said. "It must be opened with the family key." Dae-sung leaned forward smoothly. "I have it." He produced a gold key on a chain, holding it up like proof of inheritance. The lawyer hesitated. Chairman Han specified a sun key. Dae-sung's smile tightened. "This is the family key." The lawyer swallowed. He was very clear. Yura's gaze flicked to Nia's chest, then to Eli's. Nia's pulse spiked. Junho's eyes went to Eli's pendant, and Nia realized he was making the same calculation she was. They know. Dae-sung's voice stayed pleasant. Chairman Han was sentimental. The sun key is likely symbolic. The lawyer hesitated, fingers trembling. Nia's throat tightened. She could feel the room tilting toward Dae-sung's control. She could feel Yura's triumph waiting to bloom. Junho stepped forward, calm as death. "It's not symbolic," he said softly. He crouched to Eli's level, voice gentle. "May I?" Eli glanced at Nia. Nia's heart hammered. This was the moment, the one Han had predicted. She nodded once. Eli lifted his chin, and Junho carefully drew the sun pendant out from under Eli's shirt, holding it up. A ripple went through the room, recognition, shock, greed. Yura's breath caught. Dae-sung's eyes sharpened. The lawyer stared. Junho placed the pendant on the table. It wasn't just a charm. Up close, Nia saw a tiny groove along its edge, a seam she'd never noticed, a key hidden inside warmth. Junho pressed the pendant into a small recess on the sealed addendum box, exactly where the lawyer pointed, and with a soft click, the box unlocked. A collective inhale swept the room. Dae-sung's smile vanished. "That belongs to the Kang family." Junho's voice stayed calm. "It belongs to the child who wore it." Dae-sung's eyes narrowed, sliding to Eli like he was no longer a child but a threat. Yura leaned forward, voice sweet. "You're making a scene, Junho, over a woman who lied to you and a child who—" Junho's gaze cut to her, ice cold. "Stop." Yura froze. The lawyer opened the box and pulled out a letter, hands shaking. He began to read. Chairman Han's words filled the room, warm, careful, and lethal in their truth. He wrote about threats, about manipulation, about a woman in black silk who visited a clinic and delivered a message meant to sound like love, but tasted like fear. He wrote about Kang Dae-sung's ambition, about his attempts to control the Kang group through marriage and media. He wrote about the child. Then the lawyer lifted a smaller, sealed envelope marked with one name, Nye Carter. Nia's stomach dropped. The lawyer hesitated, then handed it to her. Nia's hands trembled as she opened it, the paper cracking softly. Inside was a single photograph. A younger Junho lay in a hospital bed, pale and injured, eyes half-lidded, and beside him sat Nia, hair pulled back, eyes tired, holding a small paper sun folded from a medical form. Nia's breath caught. She remembered that night. She remembered how he had grabbed her wrist when he woke, how his voice had been rough with pain. "Don't let me go dark." She had folded the paper sun and placed it in his hand like a promise. Now, below the photo, Han had written, "She saved him first. Don't let your pride kill what your heart needs." Nia's vision blurred. Across the table, Dae-sung's control cracked. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "A nurse's sob story doesn't change inheritance." Junho's voice stayed calm. "It changes everything." Dae-sung's eyes sharpened. "Do you think I'll let you destroy me with sentiment?" Yura's smile returned, thin, poisonous. "And what about the child? Anyone can put a pendant on anyone." Nia's throat tightened, fury rising. Junho turned to the lawyer. "Present the medical report." The lawyer swallowed, pulled out a sealed document and slid it across the table. Nia's heart hammered. Junho didn't read it aloud. He didn't need to. He looked at Dae-sung and Yura and said, voice quiet as a blade, "He is my son." The room exploded into whispers. Yura's face drained, Dae-sung's fists clenched, and Nia realized the truth had finally stepped into the light, where it could be attacked. As Dae-sung stood with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, Nia understood he wasn't finished, and the final move would come fast. It happened in the elevator. On the way down from the suite, the door slid closed, sealing Nia, Eli, Junho, and two of Junho's men into a mirrored box of breath and tension. Nia's heart was still pounding from the will reading, from the public declaration, from the way Yura's eyes had looked at Eli like he was a problem to erase. Eli pressed against Nia's side, quiet now, sensing danger the way children always did. The elevator jerked once. Then it stopped. The lights flickered. Nia's blood turned cold. Junho's posture shifted, subtle, immediate, like a predator hearing a branch snap. His men moved without sound, placing themselves between Nia and the doors. Nia's voice came out tight. "What's happening?" Junho didn't look away from the doors. "My uncle is impatient." A soft crackle came over the elevator speaker. Dae-sung's voice flowed through, pleasant and cruel. "Nephew?" Nia's stomach dropped. Junho's voice stayed calm. "Uncle." Dae-sung chuckled. "You embarrassed me upstairs." Junho's gaze didn't shift. "You embarrassed yourself." Dae-sung's tone sharpened. "Hand over the child." Nia's breath caught. She tightened her arms around Eli, body shielding him. Junho's voice stayed low, lethal. "No." Dae-sung sighed as if disappointed. "Then we do it the hard way." The elevator shuddered again. Nia felt panic rise, sharp and hot. She looked at Junho, and for a heartbeat, she saw something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. Real fear. Not for himself, for them. He turned slightly, voice low enough only she could hear. "No matter what happens, don't let go of him." Nia's throat tightened. "Don't talk like that." Junho's eyes flicked to hers, and for the first time, the mask slipped completely. "I should have protected you 6 years ago," he whispered. "I won't fail again." The elevator doors tried to part, then stuck. Metal groaned. A tool scraped outside. Junho's men braced, ready. Nia's mind raced. If they open the doors, they'll rush. They'll grab Eli. Then Eli's small hand found the pendant under his shirt and clutched it. "Mom," he whispered, voice shaking. "The sun. The sun makes me brave." Nia's breath hitched. Tears burned, but she didn't let them fall. She bent, pressing her forehead to his. "Yes, baby, be brave." The doors finally forced open. 2 men lunged. Junho moved like controlled lightning. No wasted motion, no chaos. His men intercepted, bodies colliding, shoves and grunts in the narrow space. Nia backed Eli into the corner, her own body between him and the struggle. She saw one attacker's hand reach, too close, fingers stretching toward Eli's pendant. Nia's fear snapped into fury. She grabbed the nearest object, a metal emergency handle, and swung it once, hard, striking the hand away. The man cursed, staggering. Nia's arms trembled, but her voice was steady. "Touch my child again, and I'll break you." The man hesitated, startled by her force. That pause gave Junho the second he needed. He slammed the attacker into the wall, pinning him with one forearm, eyes like ice. "You wanted the child," Junho murmured. "Tell my uncle what happens when he reaches for my son." The attacker swallowed hard, fear replacing bravado. Behind them, footsteps thundered, building security alerted by Junho's men. The attackers were dragged away. The elevator lights steadied again. Nia's knees weakened. Junho turned toward her, chest rising and falling, eyes scanning Eli for harm. When he found none, something in his face broke. Relief so intense it looked like pain. He stepped closer, stopping a foot away, respect holding him back even now. Nia's voice shook. "He won't stop." Junho's jaw tightened. "Then I end him." Hours later, the confrontation happened where Dae-sung loved power most, in front of witnesses. In Kang Group's main boardroom, glass walls overlooking Seoul, Dae-sung sat with forced calm while lawyers and executives lined the room. Cameras waited outside, hungry. Junho entered with Nia and Eli beside him. Dae-sung's smile was polite. "You're making this ugly." Junho's voice was quiet. "You made it ugly when you threatened a woman and tried to steal a child." Dae-sung's eyes narrowed. "Allegations." Junho nodded slightly, as if agreeing. "Then let's speak in facts." He gestured, and a screen lit up. Footage played, security videos, recorded meetings, Chairman Han's own dated notes. Not instructions, not secrets of crime, just proof of manipulation and threats. Dae-sung's face tightened as his own voice echoed through the room, talking about erasing Nia, about keeping Junho obedient, about controlling the heir story. Yura sat at the far end of the table, pale, lips trembling. When her voice played, sweet and poisonous, threatening a pregnant nurse in a clinic, the room seemed to stop breathing. Nia's stomach turned. Hearing it aloud made the past feel sharp again. Junho's voice cut through the silence. "You threatened her. You lied to me. You tried to take my son." Dae-sung's smile cracked. "You think the board will choose you over me, over stability?" Junho stepped forward, calm as winter. "The board will choose truth." He turned briefly to Nia, and then he did what Han's note demanded. He chose her in public again, not with a promise, with a bow. Kang Junho, heir of the Kang Empire, bent his head toward Nia Carter in front of every executive in the room. It was a silent apology and a public declaration. She would not be hidden. The room shifted. Dae-sung's power cracked like glass. Minutes later, officers escorted Dae-sung out under investigation, his face twisting with rage and humiliation. Yura broke down, crying and pleading, but no one moved to save her. Nia watched, heart pounding. Justice didn't erase pain, but it did return dignity. Outside the boardroom, Junho turned to Nia, his eyes raw. "I can't change what I did," he said quietly. "I can only spend my life making sure you never stand alone again." Nia's throat burned. This was the moment she had imagined in anger and loneliness, him begging, her winning. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing at the edge of something fragile. Eli looked up at Junho, voice small. "Are you gonna leave?" Junho crouched, eyes level with the boys. "No." He glanced at Nia. "Not unless your mom tells me to." Nia swallowed hard, tears finally rising. She took a slow breath and spoke the truth that mattered most. "I'm not your prisoner," she said to Junho. "I'm not your secret. If we do this, we do it with respect." Junho nodded once. "Always." Nia stared at his outstretched hand, steady, open, waiting. And for the first time in 6 years, she realized the choice really was hers. When Nia finally reached for his hand, she wondered whether love could survive the weight of everything they'd lost. Spring arrived slowly in Seoul, as if even the city needed time to trust warmth. Naya stood at Chairman Han's grave with Eli beside her, the boy holding a small bouquet of bright flowers he had chosen himself. The sun pendant rested against his chest, catching light like it had been waiting for this season. Jun-ho stood a respectful step behind them, hands clasped, suit simple, face quieter than usual. Nia knelt, placing her flowers gently. "You were right," she whispered. "The sun did come back." Eli glanced up at Jun-ho. "Grandpa Han liked you." Jun-ho's throat moved as he swallowed. "He saved me." Eli tilted his head. "Mom saved you too." Jun-ho's eyes flicked to Nia, softening. "Yes," he said quietly. "She did." Nia rose, brushing dirt from her knees. She didn't reach for Jun-ho's hand automatically. She didn't pretend everything was healed, but she did stand beside him, by choice, not force. Her life wasn't a fairy tale. It was a rebuild. She returned to her hospice work on her own terms, and no one dared whisper about her place anymore. Not when Kang Jun-ho himself visited the ward sometimes. Not as a king, but as a man who carried soup for tired families and held doors open without expecting gratitude. Eli adjusted his backpack one morning, grinning up at Jun-ho. "Are you coming to my school thing?" Jun-ho nodded. "If you want me there." Eli's smile widened. "Yeah, Appa." The word, Dad, fell from the boy's mouth like sunrise. Jun-ho froze for a heartbeat, emotion flashing across his face so openly that Nia's chest tightened. Then he steadied himself and crouched, meeting Eli's eyes. "I'll be there," he promised, "every time." Nia watched them, feeling the past ache and the future unfold in the same breath. That night, when Seoul's lights glittered outside the mansion windows, Jun-ho found Nia in the quiet sitting room, reading. He didn't crowd her. He didn't demand. He simply sat across from her and said softly, "Thank you for not letting the sun go out." Nia's eyes stung. She set her book down. "I didn't do it for you," she said honestly. "I did it for him. For me." Jun-ho nodded, accepting the boundary like it was sacred. "Then I'll spend my life being worthy of being near it." Nia studied him. This man who had once been power without softness, now learning how to love without possession. She didn't say everything was forgiven, but she reached across the space between them, took his hand and held it, steady and warm. Outside, the city breathed, and somewhere, far away, a phone buzzed with a new message on a new threat. But inside this room, the story that mattered had already been completed. A woman reclaimed her dignity, a child reclaimed his father, and a man learned that love wasn't something he could control. It was something he had to earn.